trying to make this work and is furthest along, and so taking subsidies away would hurt, competitors even more so than it would Tesla. It certainly wouldn't be good for Tesla to lose access to $7,500 for a lot of its customers in the U.S. or would-be customers. And right. So I do think it's very interesting, and we've heard very similar sort of anti-EV rhetoric on the part of J.D. Vance, his running mate. And so I think it's not only Trump who's sort of campaigned against EVs, but his running mate.
Our thanks to Craig Trudell, Bloomberg Global Autos editor. Coming up on the program, we'll break down a slew of bank earnings in the U.S. You're listening to Bloomberg Intelligence on Bloomberg Radio, providing in-depth research and data on 2,000 companies and 130 industries. You can access Bloomberg Intelligence via BI Go on the terminal. I'm Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg.
World markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg 99.1. Now, a global news update.
President Biden is self-isolating with COVID in Delaware as pressure mounts on him to drop his re-election bid. Jan O'Malley Dillon pushed back against reports that the president was considering exiting the race.
I'm not here to say that this hasn't been a tough several weeks for the campaign. There's no doubt that it has been. And we've definitely seen some slippage in support, but it has been a small movement.
The campaign insists the president will remain in the race. However, members of his family are said to be discussing a possible exit. Nearly 3 dozen congressional Democrats have called on Biden to step aside. Former President Trump will hold his first rally today since last week's assassination attempt. Trump will be joined by running mate J.D. Vance at a campaign event in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The Pennsylvania firefighter who was killed at former President Trump's rally in Pennsylvania last weekend has been laid to rest. Corey Comparator died Saturday by a bullet that was apparently meant for Trump. I'm Lisa Carton.
And I'm Ed Kalegi in the Bloomberg Newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. Wall Street's focus shifts to tech earnings next week, specifically Tesla and Alphabet, after a wild week for the U.S. stock market. We get more on the story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Most groups in the S&P 500 declined, with the gauge having its worst week since April, down almost 2%. That's after a rotation that saw investors trimming positions in this year's winners in favor of laggards. The S&P 500 ended the week right around 5,500. The Nasdaq 100 index was down 1%, while the Russell 2000 index of smaller firms fell 0.6%. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you, Charlie. A grand experiment is underway in Nevada, where an endangered desert wildflower stands in the way of a mining company's plans to dig for lithium. We get that story from Bloomberg's Amy Morris.
Australia-based Lanier says the mine it wants to dig in the Nevada desert would more than quadruple U.S. production of lithium, needed to speed production of electric vehicles and clean energy projects. Conservationists who support the move to tackle climate change are fiercely fighting the mine because it would dig deep into the world's only known patch of land where the endangered Teams buckwheat grows. So far, the Bureau of Land Management has endorsed the company's latest strategy, which includes propagating and transplanting the buckwheat. Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
The Pentagon took first delivery on Friday of the latest version of F-35 fighter jets after deciding not to wait any longer for delayed hardware and software updates, allowing payments to resume to Lockheed Martin. 2 35A Lightning II aircraft were delivered after a halt last year. One went to Dannelly Field, Alabama, the other to Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. Move comes after officials decided that the Defense Department could not wait any longer for the full TR-3 upgrade to complete testing, given that jets were left parked at a Lockheed facility in Texas, where they might suffer weather damage, and pilots were not able to train on the aircraft. Global news 24 hours a day and whatever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Ed Kalegi. This is Bloomberg.
The best way to listen to Bloomberg Radio is on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Download the Bloomberg Business app on your smartphone today. Then listen to us anywhere from coast to coast and across the globe. Get it all Live radio, podcasts, and hourly news updates on demand at the click of a button. The Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto features. Download it free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. Bloomberg Radio. Context changes everything.
Westwood One Sports presents this special report on the 152nd British Open Championship, sponsored by Vanguard Investments and Advice for all of life's chapters. It is coming down in Troon, and it's going down on the golf course. Leaderboard shakeups. Billy Horschel made 4 birdies on his opening 9. Dan Brown bogeyed the postage stamp. Shane Lowry doubled it. It was a 3-way tie for the lead at -6 as the final pairing heads for the inward 9, but Brown just made a bogey at 10. He drops back now to -5. Xander Schauffele is 4 under, -3 today. Tristan Lawrence, Sam Burns, Russell Henley, all 3 under, all in the clubhouse as the rain continues to come down at Royal Troon. Scotty Scheffler, 3 under, and right now playing the 12th. Horschel and Lowry at 6 under par, Dan Brown at -5. With this report on the British Open, I'm Whit Watson, Westwood One Sports.
At Vanguard, you're more than just an investor, you're an owner. So whether you're planning for retirement or trying to save up for your next big adventure, Vanguard will help work alongside you to set personalized investment goals. That's the value of ownership. All investing is subject to risk. Vanguard is owned by its funds, which are owned by Vanguard's fund shareholder clients. Vanguard Marketing Corporation, distributor.
NFL Plus Premium is your ticket to the NFL offseason.
With the first pick in the NFL Draft.
Catch all your favorite offseason coverage and stream exclusive content from the NFL Draft, training camp, free agency, and more. Relive the biggest plays from the season with full and condensed game replays.
He's in! Touchdown!
Plus, stay connected with 24/7 football news and coverage on NFL Network. Sign up today at plus.nfl.com. Terms and conditions apply.
The following is a commercial message.
Welcome to the MDY Mid-Cap Cup, presented by State Street Global Advisors. I'm joined by Annika Sorenstam and Tony Fina. Today's challenge is to play 9 holes without the middle of your bag. Because in golf, like in your financial portfolio, the middle can make all the difference.
Watch the challenge at ssga.com/midcapcup. Before investing, consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. Visit ssga.com for a prospectus containing this and other information. Read it carefully before investing. Investments in mid-sized companies may involve greater risks than those in larger, better-known companies, but may be less volatile than smaller companies. Alps distributor, Sync distributor.
Join us in Atlanta or via live stream on August 22nd for Bloomberg's Business Value of AI event and networking reception. This event will gather business and technology executives to share their experiences and provide insights into their strategies for deploying AI that achieves a desirable ROI. You'll also learn how companies have successfully implemented AI solutions that have improved productivity and profitability. This program is proudly sponsored by IBM. Register at bloomberglive.com/AI/radio.
Now your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 99.1.
For tonight, a chance of showers this evening, otherwise partly cloudy, lows 70 to 75. Sunday, a mostly sunny day, highs ranging between 90 and 95 degrees. Monday, cloudy, showers and thunderstorms possible during the day, highs 85 to 90. Tuesday, showers are likely, a chance of thunderstorms by afternoon, and a high near 90. That's your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 99.1.
Take a not-so-random walk through hot topics in markets and finance.
The case of the counterfeit commodities collateral.
Tough times in the offshore wind sector.
The Odd Lots Podcast with Joe Weisenthal and Tracy Alloway.
How does machine learning actually work?
Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app and anywhere you get your podcasts.
We're leaning into the sort of 90s Nickelodeon SpongeBob vibe, maybe?
Bloomberg Podcasts. Context changes everything.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The pandemic savings that helped Americans weather high prices in recent years are gone, contributing to a loss of consumer firepower rippling through the economy. Hoyt Blakely is a professor of economics at the University of Michigan.
The federal government matched a lot of the consumer savings by borrowing quite a bit on the government side. And so those things kind of counterbalance each other. That let consumers save extra during a period when, at the early part, there were just fewer opportunities for spending.
But things have changed.
Whatever buffer had been accumulated from the COVID era has dissipated. And so, yes, something is going to have to give.
Delinquencies are rising. Executives are flagging caution among shoppers in recent earnings calls, and retail sales barely increased in May after falling the month before.
The question of how that translates to the U.S. economy depends on whether the consumer was spending it all on stuff that was imported or whether it was spending the consumer would spend on things that were produced domestically or things like housing.
I'm Ed Corey, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt U.S. Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for greatest of all time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We move now to U.S. bank earnings. This week, we got quarterly results from Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, and Goldman Sachs. And all three firms posted double-digit increases in investment banking revenue. For more, we were joined by Allison Williams, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Analyst, Global Banks and Asset Managers. We first asked Allison what the street liked about Morgan Stanley's quarterly results.
Really strong institutional numbers. I mean, it was a great quarter for trading and investment banking. So equities trading really, I think, a source of strength. Morgan Stanley doing better than expected across the board. So equities trading, I think, was the standout. Fixed income, was sort of mixed, but really compared to a year ago, I think that's strong. Those revenues are turning out to be resilient. And on the investment banking side, investors are excited that there could be momentum coming into the next quarter. M&A still just historically low, so improving from a low base. Same thing with equities, but I think reasons for optimism, especially with the stocks in general doing so well.
Now, for Bank of America, when I think of Bank of America, I think of their corporate bank, making big loans to big corporate customers around the world. What did you see there?
So, I think the demand for loans is still something that we're looking more for the second half. If we do get the Fed rate cuts, that is definitely going to be a help. And I think for Bank of America, what people are excited about is that it could be the trough. So Bank of America saying that it's going to be the trough. This will be the weakest quarter, but keep in mind that they are baking in the Fed rate cut expectations and some loan growth in the second half. So we'll see if they can deliver that. But definitely telling investors what they want to hear in terms of the fourth quarter. A little bit higher entry rate, firming that up, and again, that most of the weakness could be behind us.
So does that mean that if we don't get Fed cuts, that Bank of America is going to have some problems here?
I think where the disappointment will come will be loan growth spurred by Fed cuts, right? So I think that some of the loan growth that they're factoring in is based on that. We heard from Wells Fargo where they're still a lot more cautious on the loan growth side, and commercial and industrial has been a weak spot. Credit card has been the strong spot.
When I was in banking, one of our most lucrative businesses at the Chase Manhattan Bank was just leverage lending. Lending to companies that don't have assets or inventory and that kind of just lend against cash flow. It's a little bit more risky. It's tough to show your credit officer where the collateral is for this loan. But we made a lot of money doing it. How's the private credit market been poaching on that business?
So actually, you would have been this would have been a good quarter for you.
I know.
You'd be happy. The first quarter was good. Second quarter was good. And I think that if you look at some of the most recent statistics that we've seen is that banks are still doing a lot of that refinancing, right? So a lot of the business that's been happening in the debt markets, debt fees, a source of strength across the banks this quarter, has been refinancing, and that leveraged lending business has been doing well at the bank. So even though private credit is certainly raising a lot of funds and a product in demand, banks are still getting their share of refinancing in the leverage loan volumes. And that's, you saw like the huge growth at Citigroup and the numbers at Goldman Sachs where they have relative strength in those businesses. High yield's another area that's doing really well.
Back back to the consumer. So we'll have Paul do the investment banking stuff, I'll do the consumer stuff. What about charge-offs on their credit card losses for Bank of America? Was that higher, lower? Where did that come in?
I mean, in general, I would say their provisions overall came in line.
Okay.
We did see, charge-offs in the card business, charge-offs in commercial real estate. So those are areas that we're watching, but controlled and in line with expectations. I think the area of weakness that we saw in card this quarter was at Citigroup. They have a private label business that tends to skew on the lower income side of things. You're seeing losses come in above their targeted range. There is seasonal pattern to that, and so there are expectations that could come in. But I would say the second quarter did not give us confidence in those expectations. So I think that continues to be an area for watching. It's not necessarily a big area for the big banks that we're talking about, the ones that I cover. But I think it's important to watch, for the overall economy and to some of the other card names such as Synchrony.
CEO at Morgan Stanley. We have a new CEO, Ted Pick. I guess with a little bit of hindsight here, does it seem like it's kind of working and everybody's kind of found their place? And
so it seems like, he's talking with conviction. I think the boldest statement he made was with regard to the margins in the wealth business. So the wealth business, as you know, under the former CEO, and a lot of acquisitions, wealth and asset management is the predominant revenue and profit engine. It's what investors are watching. The wealth margin was something where Pick early in the year took off some of the upside under the prior targets. And that 30% wealth target, I think, is a question among investors if they can get there. And Ted really trying to instill confidence that he is a believer. The wealth flows at Morgan Stanley, I would say, that is probably the number one thing I think that we watch for them. And that did come in weak this quarter. The fee-based part of those flows were relatively resilient, so some puts and takes there. But I think the wealth flows do bear watching, and that really has been the engine of optimism. Investors like, the tilt towards the recurring fee-based business. And so I think that they'll have to continue to deliver on that 30% margin that Pick is confident in.
And then I'll go to sort of what the macro read is from Morgan Stanley, because also on the call, Ted Pick said that you're going to see normal M&A return unless there's a full-blown recession, and he thinks we're in the early stages of multi-year investment banking-led cycle. Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah, but we've been hearing that for so many quarters now, and you're starting to definitely, feel more of the doubt coming from analysts, right? Okay. So the 2021, amazing. 2022, disaster. The lift that we got last year did not materialize. I would say that so far this year, M&A has been disappointing again. And, you can see in terms of the reported fees and the announcements, right? So both of those have been disappointing. It does tend to pick up late in the year. It does tend to pick up after elections. So I think it'll be hard to get, for that particular business line, sort of the momentum people are looking for, perhaps until after the election. But on the underwriting side, I think is where you're seeing, perhaps more of the momentum and strength. Goldman Sachs, though, who tends to be the biggest in reported revenue, did say significant uptick in their pipeline. Debt underwriting and advisory were the areas of strength.
Our thanks to Allison Williams, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Analyst, Global Banks and Asset Managers. We move next to the airline space. This week, United Airlines reported second quarter profit that grew thanks to strong travel demand. But the airline also said third quarter profit will fall short of Wall Street's expectations. United warned that price cuts by low-cost carriers are weighing on the entire airline industry. For more, guest host Matt Miller and I were joined by George Ferguson, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Aerospace, Defense and Airlines Analyst. We first asked George for his take on this week's results.
The industry is just suffering from overcapacity, right? United confirmed that. Delta told us the same thing earlier. We saw Alaska results come out. Their load factors down, yields flat, load factors down, telling me they can't fill airplanes at the right price point. We need capacity to come out. Everybody's pointing to an inflection point in 3Q. United said that they'd get down to maybe after mid-August, maybe 2-3% growth in capacity. I think this is still a too high level of capacity growth, right? This is in an economy that probably year over year grew about 1%. I think that number ought to be tied much closer to GDP growth. You talk about unemployment rising, right? So the U.S. economy appears to be slowing a bit. So I think those things are working against the airlines right now. A bunch of capacity has to come out, I think, to get back to pricing power, and that's what's needed to get profitability going.
So how does that happen? I mean, do the airlines themselves pull capacity out? Don't they have competition in this market? Don't we have regulators to ensure that?
Yeah, so how does it happen? We're starting to see some of it happen. Alaska announced that they were going to add more premium seating to their...
Can I just pause here for a fun fact, George? For a long time, Paul Sweeney thought that the Eskimo on the Alaska Airlines tail was actually a picture of Jerry Garcia. I did.
Yeah, no, actually, he's told me that. I'm not sure what that says about Paul Sweeney.
Exactly. I mean, what an airline to put a picture of Jerry Garcia on the tail.
They're so cool.
All right, so sorry, go ahead.
So we're starting to see capacity come out with these announcements like Alaska, where they said, we're going to add more premium seating, which usually means a bit less capacity in the marketplace. Frontier's going to block your middle seat, so you get a premium seat out of Frontier. That obviously brings some capacity out. What you really need is you need airlines to start parking airplanes, and I think that's hard too, right? So United, Delta, all jazzed up about this inflection point, but look, I would note that there's a lot of very fast-growing, low-cost airlines in the U.S., Frontier, Spirit, even JetBlue, right? They lease a lot of airplanes. You fly airplanes you lease because you got to pay that lease payment no matter what, right? So I think it gets difficult here, and it takes a little while to get capacity out. Maybe next summer.
I was talking to CEO JSX. They fly fascinating routes. For example, they'll fly from the Westchester Airport to the Naples Airport,
right,
or some airport outside of LA into Palm Beach. So are we going to see more of these upstarts, George?
Well, so we always do in the industry, right? So the beautiful thing about this industry is when people sell airplanes, someone buys them cheap and starts flying routes like that. And there's always some of the ones that come to this industry, right? It's got just a heavy allure. Everybody wants to own an airline. That becomes one of the challenges too, I think, in sort of making money in this industry. But the big folks, they'd love to have more, more maybe the ultra low cost point at those smaller airports. But you just don't get the demand out of those smaller airports, to really fill big airplanes. And so that becomes part of the challenge. I think right now, one of the bigger parts of the challenge is definitely business is we heard United say 100% of what it was in 2019. Obviously, that gives you sort of no growth since the pandemic. They're saying the share of revenue in the cabin is lower. That's always at a really nice price point, and business likes to go different places than leisure does, so it diversifies your routes to a certain degree, but you need enough of it to go to those other destinations. So business just isn't back enough, I think, to let the big full-service carriers move into maybe some smaller-size airplanes, more diversified destinations, and get competition off those, sort of heavy volume routes. And I think that's part of the problem too.
Our thanks to George Ferguson, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Aerospace, Defense, and Airlines Analyst. That's this week's edition of Bloomberg Intelligence on Bloomberg Radio, providing in-depth research and data on 2,000 companies and 130 industries. And remember, you can access Bloomberg Intelligence via BI-Go on the terminal. I'm Paul Sweeney. Stay with us. Today's top stories and global business headlines are coming up right now.
Broadcasting to the nation's capital, this is WDCH-FM, Bowie, Baltimore, Washington. WJZ-FM, HD2, Catonsville. Bloomberg 99.1. Programming paid for by Bloomberg. Now, a global news update.
President Biden is self-isolating with COVID in Delaware as pressure mounts on him to drop his re-election bid. Jen O'Malley Dillon pushed back against reports that the president was considering exiting the race.
I'm not here to say that this hasn't been a tough several weeks for the campaign. There's no doubt that it has been. And we've definitely seen some slippage in support, but it has been a small movement.
The campaign insists the president will remain in the race. However, members of his family are said to be discussing a possible exit. Nearly 36 congressional Democrats have called on Biden to step aside. Former President Trump will hold his first rally today since last week's assassination attempt. Trump will be joined by running mate J.D. Vance at a campaign event in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The Pennsylvania firefighter who was killed at former President Trump's rally in Pennsylvania last weekend has been laid to rest. Corey Comparator died last Saturday by a bullet that was apparently meant for Trump. The private service followed a public visitation on Thursday. The 50-year-old leaves behind a wife and 2 daughters. The director of the Secret Service will be grilled by Congress on Monday over possible security lapses during a recent Trump rally. Director Kimberly Cheadle will testify before lawmakers in the House Oversight Committee and will speak publicly for the first time about the assassination attempt on former President Trump. Cheadle has refused calls to resign. President Biden is paying tribute to the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee as a great American. Biden released a statement honoring the Texas representative who died Friday at age 74 as always fearless. The president noted her work on key legislation, including the Violence Against Women Act, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and the bill that made Juneteenth a federal holiday. Jackson Lee served nearly 30 years in Congress after first being elected to the House in 1994. President Biden called her part of a long line of American patriots. I'm Lisa Carton. The global computer outage has impacted some state government systems and employee devices. Iowa reporting 1,400 servers and 3,300 workstations were impacted, or about 20% of devices across executive branch departments. IT staff are predicting all systems and devices will be restored over the weekend. The state says Iowans may notice some temporary issues. Twisters is storming the box office. Deadline reports the sequel to the 1996 film has raked in about $31 million from preview screenings Thursday and its first day in theaters yesterday. The film, starring Glenn Powell and Daisy Edgar-Jones, is now expected to bring in nearly $72 million in its first weekend against earlier projections of $50 to $60 million. Twisters has already made nearly $13 million overseas. And what's a hit movie without a hit soundtrack? Rob Martier has more.
Twisters, the album, the soundtrack for the disaster flick that features songs from some of the biggest names in country, is out now. Artists like Luke Combs, Miranda Lambert, and Megan Maroney contributed to songs to the album. Also out today is what Donald Glover has said will be his final album under his Childish Gambino name. Bando Stone and The New World also serves as the soundtrack to Glover's upcoming film of the same name.
Major League Baseball's schedule for next season is out. Shohei Ohtani and the Los Angeles Dodgers will take on the Cubs in Tokyo March 18th and 19th to start the season. March 27th will be MLB's traditional opening day, marking the earliest opening day in league history. Other key dates include May 16th through the 18th for rivalry weekend that will see 11 series between prime interleague rivals. The All-Star Game will be held July 15th in Atlanta. I'm Lisa Carton.
And I'm Ed Kalegi in the Bloomberg Newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. Nippon Steel has hired former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to help complete a proposed purchase of United States Steel. We get more in the story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
It's a deal facing bipartisan opposition from Donald Trump and President Biden. Pompeo, who served as the U.S.'s top diplomat under Trump, will be an advisor to the Japanese company for its $14.1 billion purchase. The deal's fate, though, is unclear as it undergoes a national security review and faces opposition by the United Steelworkers Union. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you, Charlie. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says apps that let workers access their paychecks before payday are effectively providing loans. Bloomberg's Amy Morris explains.
The CFPB says those services often come with a fee, so they're providing a loan and therefore subject to the Truth in Lending Act. If enacted, a rule proposed by the agency would provide clarity to a fast-growing industry known as the earned wage access that's been compared to payday loans. The agency wants borrowers to be able to easily compare products and prevent, quote, race to the bottom business practices. Earned wage access apps have been around for more than a decade, but they gained popularity since the COVID pandemic. Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Jeff Bezos has the billionaire bunker. Ken Griffin dominates Star Island. Dozens of other billionaires and captains of industry flaunt opulent Palm Beach estates. But for those who aren't quite so drenched in wealth, there's always Fort Lauderdale. The Florida city is seeing home prices surging to record levels as the merely rich hunt for abodes after being bid out by the ultra-wealthy in other locations. A Fort Lauderdale mansion, 733 Middle River, with its backyard pool deck covered in AstroTurf, has just hit the market for $47.9 million, more than 60% over what it was purchased for 16 months ago. Another house in the area, it's being offered for $50 million. And then there's the beachfront home that went for a local record of $40 million in 2023 and is now back on sale for $47.5 million. Me, I'm going to the Jersey Shore for 3 days next month. Global news, 24 hours a day, and whatever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Ed Kalegi. This is Bloomberg.
The business news Wall Street depends on.
That inflation report, Paul, is going to be key, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the insight that only Bloomberg can provide.
Markets moving, equities surge.
There's still supply chain issues out there.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
The huge wall of economic data.
Listen live weekday mornings at 7 on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Watch us on YouTube. Go to the Bloomberg Podcast page and click on the live feed. Or catch us on Bloomberg Originals. This is Bloomberg Business of Sports.
The business of sports can be intimidating or hard for a startup to break into.
We really appreciate when our owners are actually there, with us through the journey.
Teams, ours especially, have been very intentional to diversify at all levels of the company.
I think we're in the golden years for the NFL and college football.
Our demographic reach has continued to expand.
This is going to be really unlocking the streaming platform for sports fans.
Sports valuations are rising. We'll see when they peak.
You don't have to be the best in your sport to make a whole ton of money.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports show. We explore big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr.
I'm Scarlett Fu.
And I'm Damian Sassower.
On the lineup today, streaming service Roku secured exclusive multi-year rights for MLB's Sunday leadoff baseball games as part of their Roku Sports Zone package. We'll get the details on how this agreement came to be with the president of Roku Media, Charlie Collier.
So we've built, a sports experience where if you're a fan of the NBA, we not only have access to every NBA game in an easy way, we can help you find it no matter which service it's on, but we also have an exclusive NBA Fast channel, which is doing really well. And we have G League games, and we have ways to super serve the fan that I think are really important and really only possible because, an open ecosystem platform like ours can make that simple.
Plus, the world's most valuable women's